let's just jump straight into the topic, Zan. So you were telling me lately that you were traveling really a lot in North America and on some speaking arrangements, and you've been speaking to quite a lot of men in person,
Hmm.
obviously after this long break, right? And we had a chat the other day about some of the topics that have been percolating in your travels and in your discussions. So do you want to present that? Should we kick off the episode? You just say
Yeah,
some of the things that you're discovering, what's top of your mind, what are men in our extended audience
sure.
currently dealing with?
Do you want to lead it by saying we had a brief conversation recently about something? Do you want to like
Yeah,
or
I just did.
oh,
I,
sorry, buddy.
I just did exactly that.
Okay, give a clap and then
All
we'll go
right,
again.
all right. Okay, we'll start again. Okay. All
Wonderful.
right, let's dive right into the episode. Zan, you have been telling me lately that you've been traveling in North America after a few years, obviously locked down in Europe.
Locked up.
And you started to share the other day on one of our team meetings some of the themes that men were bringing to you, right? Like what are the hot topics in our extended audience at this moment in time? What are some of the issues that men are going through? And yeah, I'm curious to hear what's top of mind. What have men been telling you directly? How would you phrase it?
Mm.
Where do we kick off? Because it seemed like this was a meaningful topic.
Yeah, I think for the first time in on my 20 years of doing this, or more than 20 years, there's a real shift in the energetic conversation of men and what they're seeking and what they're struggling with. And one thing that really struck me when I was in North America and I was talking to different groups, and I'm talking to groups of young men, and they're saying to me that scientifically speaking, the testosterone of men has been reduced in the last 20, 30, 40 years. From they were saying, I haven't validated this, but they're saying there's some studies that show since World War II, the testosterone of men has dropped 30% across the board. And I'm sitting and listening to this. I'm thinking, I guess what struck me with that is what made me scratch my head a bit is I've been talking about our sexual energy for all these years and how we have been suppressing our thrusting, beautiful, masculine, divine desire to bend the world over. We've been talking about this for years, and how women are missing that energy from men, and how men are missing that energy in themselves. And and then I'm wondering, it, it is the audience not understanding what I'm saying because they don't have that sexual drive? Uh, that's kind of like my head scratch. And I'm sitting in my hotel room when I was traveling around after talking to guys, thinking, wait a minute, maybe they don't understand what I'm saying, or they understand it, but they don't feel it. I don't know.
Mm.
I mean, that's the number one thing that's striking to me right now is that I've been talking about how we should tap into our visceral masculine edge, our desire, which makes us build cities, which makes us travel and become adventurers, get out of our father's home and go into the world, makes us do all these things, makes us have the courage to go talk to a girl that we might be nervous, but we still have this courage to go and say, at least I'm trying, at least I'm doing it. And I'm wondering, to exaggerate, is it falling on deaf ears? Maybe guys
Right.
don't have that. Maybe they don't feel they're in their heads and analytical, but they don't feel it in their body, that real primal desire.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So maybe we should start off there to flesh out terms a little bit and bring alive a definition, because you talked about a very visceral masculine energy that wants to go out and penetrate the world.
Yes.
How, how do you know that that exists in the first place?
Well,
Basic principles.
because I don't think I think that the whole energy of men is to thrust, to drive forward, to and that's, I mean, this is the history of of our civilizations. This is why we pick up and go to another, they migrated to America, for instance, from Europe, because they could stay here in this small energetic field, or they can go and try and build something and try and do something for their family and for their future and for their hearts. It's a call to adventure, and you can't have that without a real strong masculine love of creation. I don't think so. In my reading of the history of philosophy and the history of stories and the history of ancient texts and the history of, I read my whole thing is like, I don't read a lot of I like stories, and to me the greatest stories are the ones that involve journey, so there's a journey, so there's a, you could probably say that all the stories could be reduced to two different themes. Either one, the hero goes out to seek something, or a stranger comes to town. One of those two, to bottle it up. But that, in my reading of history, in my reading of stories and adventures and literature, it's all in my mind. It's imbued with this masculine drive forward. So maybe I'm wrong, but my assumption, and maybe that I'm in my late 50s, and I have this real horn dog desire. I'm just I'm a horny guy, and I'm saying to guys, man, can you feel that? Because I can sure feel it. You see the shape of a woman. Wow, that's God's created energy. I believe in art, and I believe in the history of art because of the shape of a woman. And I say these things to men because I feel it, and men nod their heads. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, but I wonder, am I overtly that way? Am I more that way than most men? I don't know. My assumption all these years is no. They all have that. Right. Maybe my assumption is misguided. What the heck?
You're waking up in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to distill this a little bit down, because you said that there is this visceral, creative, thrusting drive that's core to the masculine spirit, right? And you could talk about the history of art and emigration and every great story of adventure, that it must have come from this very male virile force, right?
Yes.
That could be a bit of an abstraction, but you're also saying, and I'm hearing, that you have an experience of feeling, like within your own body, you feel and you are in touch with, and that you've been in touch with for many years, with a kind of a horny virile force that wants to go out there, that is excited for women, that is horny for women, but also excited for some bigger thing. And I'm hearing that it's the visceral feeling of it, how it kind of, I don't know, bubbles or fires or fizzes or whatever it does in your body. Like, that's something that you identify with very strongly, and that you feel is missing in newer generations, and also newer generations are reporting to you that that's missing.
That's right. And that's your whole motivation. That's your motivation. You could talk yourself into motivation away with your head alone and say, okay, it is prudent for me and productive for me to go and get a wife, for instance, right? So you could maybe analytically talk your way through it.
And many men do.
Yeah, but yeah, there's so many guys, young guys, that say, I worked in my business for 10 years. I guess I should start thinking about women, huh? I'm like,
how are you not thinking of women before you started work?
Yeah,
maybe
it's time to turn my attention to that. So
yeah,
to me, all of motivation for a man comes from that desire to procreate and to connect. That's been my assumption all these years. And so when I used to tell the story that I would go out to the bars when in my feckless youth, my 20s, when I was lost and alone and lonely and insecure, but I would go out to the bar or out into the evening 4 nights a week for a couple decades by myself, because of the motivation, because I wanted to connect, and I was horny, and I wanted to meet girls. I wanted to meet girls. The old saying, well, I don't know if it's an old saying, but the old saying, which I just made up, I think, is, a man would go places, or no, how do I say it? Your dick will lead you places that you wouldn't go with a gun. It's like, what the heck? It's kind of that feeling,
Wow, I want to get that printed out on a placard and stick it in the kitchen or something like that. That's epic.
That's been my history, It's like I've gone some places where I wouldn't normally go.
In fact, I can attest to that one as well. And
right?
It's a good job I didn't go with a gun, because I might have got shot. That's for sure. All right. So I want to ask you this is a kind of a coaching question. It's not really a podcast question, but I want to flesh this phenomena out a little bit, right?
Okay. Yeah.
For the sake of this conversation. But when you talk about motivation, right? I'm hearing you talk about motivation, but you're also talking about this thrusting masculine force as the same thing, essentially. Where do you feel this where do you feel the source of motivation in your body, and what is the flow of that energy?
Okay, let me temper this so there's no misguided thought here. When I say that I'm motivated by that sexual primal desire, it doesn't mean that I'm caveman lunging around the world. It's really motivated by the existential angst of loneliness and disconnectedness and insecurity in the heart of a young man for me. So yes, it was manifest in that my love language is physical touch, and I don't feel loved or seen if I don't have that. It's just my thing, right? And so it wasn't like you're just a horny guy just cavemaning around. It's not that. It's like that's an element of it, but layered over top of that is this real desire to be seen, to be connected, to be loved, to love in return, to have the concept of the beloved, which I talk about, and really move toward that and be really invited in by a woman, as opposed to getting her drunk and this kind of stuff, but to be received, in a loving way. That's really the driver. That was so you feel it here in your stomach and in your chest, where you just have this lonely angst twinge. It's like the idea, and men will relate to this. I said it before. When a birthday comes around again, and everybody's like, "Happy birthday," and you're blowing out the candles and doing this kind of stuff. Underneath that celebratory energy is a real existential feeling like, wow, this year flew by. I didn't do all the things I anticipated I was going to do, that I planned to do. And I'm already a year older, and there's a twinge of anxiety underlying it all. And that's the motivation to go forward. Let me just tangent off this, because Wagner, this is quite a tangent. The composer Wagner, who T.S. Eliot said is the most genius man that ever lived. What he did was he created tension in music. Music always would resolve to the tonic. The home note. It would go a tune that start here, go up a couple notes, and go back down to the home note, and resolve. But he put this what's called the Tristan chord. He invented the Tristan chord from the Tristan opera. And basically that is, you feel you're on the edge of the home note coming back, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then it goes somewhere else. And the tension in your body. His compositions and his musical themes mirrored the tension that is in our bodies of life, that tension that we never seem to come back to the home note, to the tonic, that anxiety I'm talking about, that twinge in our hearts. And in fact, his operas would have this tension all the way through, resolve part of it, and all the way, and come back to the tonic, the home note at the very end of the opera. So you're sitting just like a life. You're born, and then it's all tension, desire, want, need, and at the end you die and it's resolved. And so,
same as a good TV show.
Yeah, exactly. It just keeps you on suspense, and we love that suspense. But at the same time, that's our motivation to try and seek out. That's Odysseus trying to find Ithaca, trying to return back to the home note, you know? So
this is really interesting that you're going here, because it's not the answer that I would have expected you to say, because you've been talking about this sexual, horny, go out and bend the world over energy for many, many years, but I never heard you say actually it's couched or it's twinned with or fueled by or in sync somehow with this more existential, what do you call it, kind of like angst. Loneliness or an anxiety of angst. Am I living my life like fully,
that really that questioning
flying time,
that questioning twinge? It's a twinge, you could feel it, it's physical, you know? Yeah, and I haven't said it before, Jordan, until you prompted me. So it is twinned with that.
How are they twins? In what way? Because they're kind of separate things, but like there's a way that these two, I don't know, feelings, energies hook up in tandem and then create a thrust for life.
I don't know that. I can't answer that question, I don't think, without more reflection and consideration. But certainly our sexual drive gets us up off of our couch and go into the street and go to somewhere. So there's that, but is it a different thing? Yeah, it is, because it's wrapped in this feeling of some, you know, the greatest fear is that people have is that they'll be alone. To be alone is one of the worst things that could be. Not lonely, but to be just alone. And the fear of being alone when you're old, for instance. And so I think, I don't know how to answer that question. For certain, I mean, there's a three-part harmony here, which is your sexual, physical, primal desire to go into, to couple with a great feminine spirit energy. Okay. And then there's the existential angst of why are we here? What is the life well lived, and which is a combined layer, or a layer that's intertwined in some way. And then there's the cerebral layer, which is how can I learn and be productive and be curious and learn about the world and grow my knowledge and my intellect, my wisdom. That's a tripartite type of spectrum of an integrated person.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
It sounds like these three things have been hooked up in tandem. Like you've had your fields of interest, especially when you were really mostly interested in women. It's like those three things hook up. You've got an intellectual pursuit, like triple PhD in land of women's studies. You've got like the existential thing of, I don't want to be alone, I want to have someone. And then there's the physical drive. What I find interesting is that you originate with a sense of angst, existential angst and loneliness. And rather than that turning in as an introverted force, it kind of goes out. Maybe the sexual energy kind of drives it out, so it becomes this extroverted force. Launches you out into the world to have adventures, right? And the obviously the opposite would be to collapse in, like, oh my god, I feel angst, so I'm just going to surf the internet, watch a lot of TV, become a much more passive entity. That could be something that's really happening.
Which is really happening. There's a lot of men of, maybe this is related, but I'll just tangent off again. When I was in Florida recently, I was interviewed by a writer for Politico magazine, and the article hasn't come out yet, but he basically said to me, what do you see? He asked me the same question you started this podcast with, like, what is you see different? And I talk about this testosterone depletion, or seeming one anyway. But the other thing is, I was involved in the quote unquote seduction community from the very beginning, before Neil Strauss came up with the book, The Game. 20 years, basically, of dating coaches, 20 years of boot camps, 20 years of, and I'll tell you what I told this guy, which is shocking to me, is 20 years ago, when this kind of arose and the internet fostered this, and in every city, in every small town, there was things called layers, where these men would get together on a Monday night or Sunday night, and they'd share little secrets about how to get girls. And the pickup artists came out of the woodwork, and they started to promise you to get your supermodel in 3 easy moves, and everybody's going to have a girl. And all them, and what was happening then 20 years ago was a real exuberance and joy and optimism in men across the world. I traveled all over the world back then, talking to different layers and groups, and the men were excited because now there's an algorithm I can follow to get a girlfriend or to get a girl. So there was a lot of real hubbub and joy around this, and excitement around this. Wow, we have a way now. We have a way to do this. 20 years later, you look around and it's a wasteland. The pickup artists, have all melted back into the woodwork. The men who paid for all those boot camps and workshops, they didn't get their supermodel. So they're jaded and thinking that didn't work, so that hope and optimism is gone. And so what you see now in the young men across the spectrum is a real loss of hope. And it's turned inward, like you said. It's turned inward into a kind of ennui. And it's turned inward where the young men are thinking, there's no hope for me. So now you've got things like this incel type of energy, and men going their own way, and all these different types of new words that are invented on this earth, and a loss of hope in young men. And I see that, or I can hear that in the tone, is that it's just, we tried and we've given up, and there's no hope for us. And so it's more depression, more anxiety, more school shootings, more all this really dark energies that, in young men, and the men, I don't know. So my whole thesis and your whole thesis, and what we do with ours, Amorata, is we have a lot of faith in men. We don't think that men are toxic. We have a lot of faith in men, and there's a good way forward, and an honest way forward, and a respectful way forward. And we have a lot of faith in women too, where a lot of the men's movements today don't have a lot of faith in women. They think women are the problem. So it's this lack of hope that you feel, and that's what I'm feeling as I'm migrating around and listening to voices now a lot. Just there's no hope. So give up and take back the power from women, and men going their own way, and stomp on women and fight the fight, and yeah, I don't know.
Interesting. Obviously, I'm not in your shoes, and I meet a different kind of character, and I am actually meeting a lot of men in their early 20s and speaking to younger and younger parts of that generation. And I see the segment within society that understands or has come to believe that healing and awakening is the way through.
Yes.
So healing is, I'll go and do my breath work, my trauma therapy, my ayahuasca retreat, and I will get down to all the dark, toxic emotions which are causing my ennui, my apathy, my lack of self-confidence, or whatever it is. But then also awakening, like I'm going to go and sit on a mountaintop and understand how to let go. And that maybe getting the supermodel was just a mind trip anyway. So there's I see a lot of fervency with actually a lot of young men in their early 20s that have done so much yoga. It's pretty incredible, right? And it's motivated from that same angst. It's not like they grew up and just drifted into doing yoga and it's very blissful. It's like, no, I'm leaning on any technique or lineage or set of teachings here that I can follow that can break me free of this fundamental feeling that I'm in. But I think I'm pretty lucky or pretty blessed, or I'm seeing beautiful kind of green shoots.
Well,
young men fighting with everything that they've got.
Yeah, because the men that come to our work, that are drawn to our work, are a different breed than the hopeless that I'm talking about. You understand what I'm saying, right?
Okay,
so they're primed, and they want a good message, and they've done some thinking and studying and researching and contemplated their heart a little bit. So we're getting like you said, the green shoots. They're not dead husks sort of thing, and because they hear about what we're doing, they say that I resonate with that, and they travel across the world to see you, as you know, so the conversation we're having with for instance our Amorata members are of this higher elevated conversation, I think, and a hopeful. It's a hopeful thing. It's a fun celebratory thing, right? So,
just give me a second because I need to take my cat out. There's something biting on me now.
Okay.
Come on, Rock. Hi.
Hey.
Give a nice.
Hi, kitty.
Scream for the camera. Go on. Outside, boy.
Outside. Go prowl around. If anything, I'm like a cat. You know, I like to prowl around at night and then crawl back onto a lap in the morning.
Yeah,
I like
he
it.
was locked in a room. Needed his freedom.
Would you say, Jordan, related to that, you said that there's a lot of young men that are doing lots of meaningful experiences and retreats and tantric things and yoga and this kind of stuff. Do you think, and it's a very emotional thing, and it's a very, for instance, they'll do exercise with girls in one of these workshops or something, and they really feel seen and feel beloved, and they feel that it's going to be okay, that somebody, you know, and the women feel the same thing. The women are there to participate as facilitators, but they become part of the experience. They have their own experience too. Is there something in that is this calming, coming together, resolving the angst, like you said, but is there something in that turns on that masculine fire? You understand what I'm asking, right?
Yes.
Or is it more comfort and more resolution of my kind of laid back tepidness, and does it make me more fearless and more primal and more warrior spirit, or is it just a softening layer that keeps softening or keeps it softened?
Right. A lot of it depends on the view and the ethos that you have coming in to build one of these workshops for men. And particularly in the Tantra world, you'll hear people talk about different kinds of Tantra, like there's a white and a pink and a red and a black. And white would be very pure, where it's just eye gazing. And the point is, it's not sexual. It's
okay.
To the point where we just kind of transcend into some moment of shared sublime consciousness.
Sure.
It doesn't even matter that we have bodies anymore. So that's really great for exploring one dimension of spirituality, right? And then you've got I don't know if I can tell stories, would be kicked off YouTube, some of the things that I've seen in Black Tantra.
Okay.
In terms of like culty group orgiastic elements of like, just take your right on a ladder, your list of taboo from 0 to 10. And when you see 8, 9, and 10 of the sexual taboo things that you really don't want to do, like go in this workshop.
Okay.
Situation, right? Yeah. And that like sometimes is liberating and sometimes traumatizes a lot of people. You can see those kind of documentaries on Netflix, right? About people who dive too far into the deep end of some of the dark stuff. But in general, I mean, I've spent a lot of the last few years out in Thailand and Bali, and there is this very kind of green sense of empathy and healing and community. Come into our community, it's going to be empathetic, it's going to be healing. We're going to see you and really hear all of the journey that you've been through, the deepest sorrow on your heart. And basically, we are going to be a big mother for you to heal. So I've seen spaces where the women are extremely tender and sweet and mother-like, kind of like this angelic form of mother energy. And that's exactly what so many of our wounded inner child boy parts need. And also you go into these scenarios and even the men in the room are kind of embodying this mother energy. Well, they'll give you like a soft hug and gaze at you in the eye and call you brother, you know, in this really soft kind of quasi-religious voice, right? So it depending on the kind of rabbit hole you go down, you can, as a man, you can go so far into the empathy and the feminine healing archetype that you don't embody any kind of strength or power that you can transmit to men, right? Absolutely. And I think it's a minority, certain places and workshops that you can go to where they've got a viewpoint, which is, no, there is actually a radical polarity that is needed, and men feel really good the more they get polarized into their masculine. And so you can build a workshop where women are very in the feminine, and you get the different kinds of feminine energy, and then you get the men really feeling uplifted and challenged and so on. And the trick is finding a place where you can do that kind of work. Otherwise you are, going to ecstatic dance and drinking the cacao with, sorry to all our viewers who love that kind of scene, but it is a feminizing influence for the most part. And I think there's something about like the tantric or the spiritual teachings that I've grown to really trust and that have influenced my work greatly. Say things like, as a man, you need to go out and sit on the mountain for 4 days, 4 nights. That's why we do the vision quest.
Right.
Or like spend your time apart so you can polarize, or even being in the company of men does things to raise your testosterone.
Yeah.
So you come back to the circle of women and you've got like a warrior charge.
Now, right. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you want to add
something?
No.
I'm listening. Yeah. I'm listening.
The way I structure my own workshops is that we start off with elements of comfort and heartfulness. Like, first, are you in your body? Are you available? Which means, are you willing to share a little bit how you're feeling and also feel how the other person's feeling? Are you in your heart? Do you have a celebratory spirit for the women that you're doing some work with? And when that is online, when a man is like, first of all, present and available, second of all, heartful in his heart, then we go to the more kind of decisive nitty-gritty of, what about your attraction, the more erotic polarity?
Right.
Are you ready to do that? And the reason that we do it is that a lot of men who come in with a super abundance of sexual energy, they can attune to being present and in connection first. So women feel safe. It's your old teaching of upper energy and lower energy. There's no point helping a man to get more lower energy if his upper energy is not there, because he's just going to become this scary proposition, right?
Yeah.
So that's how we set it up. Yeah. And that's super important. And I do think that there is a lot of oxytocin and healing and sweetness in these workshops. But as soon as you get into, and here's the thing, you get in a relationship with a woman who is actually dedicated to her own personal growth, and she will speak the truth. Like, a lot of women will not speak the truth because so many cultural reasons, and that's just dangerous. And so they kind of repress what they really feel, and it leaks out the side, manipulation and so on. You get in a relationship with a woman who's speaking her truth all day long, like, that's super challenging. And that will require you to learn a lot about boundaries, a lot about conviction, a lot about, defending and speaking your own goodness. So you start to do some of this polarity work, and you get in relationships with them, and it's a real gym. Like, testing you to be sharp and clear about what you mean, and are you really speaking your truth all the time?
Yeah, interesting. It's a new kind of concept that, the last couple of months, as I was wandering around and thinking about this, and the idea that for whatever reason, and is perpetrated, and the men are telling me this, the young men are saying this, that they just don't feel what I've been harping on about for the last 20 years in general, or not in general, but maybe it's outliers, but it's bizarre. And then the workshops, unless they're tapping into like what your workshop that you do with men, which is powerful, and I've seen it, if they don't go into that danger, dark forest energy of man, that the Jungian archetype of the shadow archetype, side of things, then it's just perpetuating this nice guy energy that's solvent over the world. It's a solvent.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's not immediate work. So I see the men in our community that resonate a lot with the things that I'm saying. And I know that these are men that have been out there for quite a while and they've discovered a lot of things for themselves.
Right.
It's very, very difficult to take a man who has been so conditioned to be in his head and then drop him in a 2-day workshop and he gets access to his complete darkness. Because what you've got, like what you're talking about in this kind of pelvic hip region, is your desire to thrust. You've got sexual fantasies that you might have, which are absolutely taboo and probably impossible, right? You've got killer instinct.
Yeah.
You've got the beast, like whatever that means. But like when the animal inside you gets riled and wants to kind of smash things and break plates, all these things that you see from impassioned men who kind of lose their sense of presence and lash out in ways, like these are all traits that are built into our energy. We need to discharge them and feel them. So if you've never felt into your hips and your pelvis and some of this real world darkness, and then you go in a workshop and you start going there, so you start getting into your body and feeling closer and closer, well, you might be going down there, but at some point in time, a part of you is going to come in and stop the whole process.
Because it's too far, it's too dangerous to go there, right? Or it's too
uncomfortable. I'm feeling this thing that I used to feel when I was 4 years old, and I remember what a hammering I took from my father. No, I'm not going to go there again. And a person can shut down, like the flow of energy that goes through a body. The ego can shut that down in a second. If you're like, oh no, I'm feeling aroused, I'm feeling horny. A woman came in the room and I don't know, I got semi-erect just looking at her come in with a skirt that she was wearing. For some people, that stops the breath, goes up the body, all the abdominals, the ribs, all of the breathing apparatus clenches up. And so energy can't flow through the body anymore. You get this kind of stagnation of simmering frustration, but you've got no cycle of energy. And so if you've been doing inner work for a while, and if you've got enough trust in yourself that you can let some darkness flow, you can step into a workshop and open up the darker elements of your lower body energy. But if you're, if you just stepped out of, I don't know, the kind of learning that you do is everything on a blackboard and you're taking notes. You remember probably in the earlier days of doing your work, you'd have guys there on the computer writing everything down. Like it was really a 1, 2, 3, absolutely in the head. Right. So if you take someone who's got no existing capacity to let go of some of their ego structure and their clenching and their habits, and try and do something deep in the body, they'll hit the wall and pop out. And I think you've seen also in workshops by some coaches doing energy work and embodiment work, people go from this super heady existence straight into their darkness within 5 minutes, and then they can't take it. And the next thing they're doing is booking their flight to go home because I went too dark too soon and all of my conditioning is freaked out. So it's difficult work, and being honest with you, the kind of men that I look at in the world and think, wow, you're virile. Your hips and pelvis, kind of like John Wayne archetypes, like so in his hips. It's super compelling, right? A masculine man with that energy structure. You don't find many men like that less than 40 years old.
No, not anymore.
Unless you're the kind of athlete and school team or something like that who just had, that one cool guy friend at school, the kind of James Dean guy. But very, very few other people get that.
But that's vilified nowadays too, right? It's like the John Wayne's energy of the world is like is cast as it's repainted as a toxic type of energy. Problematic. Right? There you go. Yeah. It's troublesome. Needs improvement.
Yeah. You should go to a workshop and get in your heart, John Wayne. Drink the magic potion and look you Shaktis in the eye.
Yeah.
It's I mean it was back in the early 90s, I think, when the early days of the men's movement, right? There were a lot of poets and teachers that came together. Robert Bly with the Iron John book, which is a kind of source text of any man who wants to delve into what we're talking about here. even then they were talking about the amount of toxic shame that men grow up with because the fathers are absent, and they grow up in a household where they're absorbing the paradigm of the mother. And so in order to survive, they need to continually get the approval of the mother in terms to be okay, so that they can be okay. When they grow up into adulthood, they're continually referencing the mother figure, maybe a feminist perspective or a kind of heart chakra perspective of like, oh, empathy for the whole world and so on. And so that was in the 90s. They were talking about men who had an absence of fathers and who've lost touch with a sense of real masculine virtues on courage, being grounded in a kind of work that you stand for. And now we're 30 years beyond that. So that's been the philosophy. That philosophy has been available for 30 years, and it's just grown exponentially. And just the layers of conditioning, the layers of reasons why, as a young man, you would numb out your hips and your pelvis and the flow of energy down there because you yourself are problematic. And I tell you what, it is a hard task to be a man and stand on this earth and say, and to claim, as you say it, to claim my sexual energy is a good, holy, God-given thing.
Right.
I think you're talking about less than 1% of all men. And the way this works is that we grow up with so much doubt about it, right? The kids at school think you should bang more women and be more cool. And they're talking about the pornos that they're stolen from the supermarket, whatever. But then if you get caught looking at anything at home, you know that you're going to be dumped into shame. So masturbation happens with the bedroom door closed and then hunched over like this. So there's no flow of energy in the body. You just like hunch, and already you're bringing yourself to climax, but your hand is already on top of the monitor so that if the door opens, you're ready to close the thing. So that's how we're actually conditioning the flow of sexual energy through the body, right? It happens in those, what happens in those years is so it has deep grooves. And then you kind of grow up and you're like, well, I love my mom and she's always doing nice things for me. So I want to subscribe to her philosophical worldview because that's a good thing. And you just end up seeing men that are, what do you call it? These cocky men. Oh, I hate that guy. He's so cocky. Yes, mum, I will never be like that because I honor and respect you. So every time you kind of judge a cocky man or an asshole or a man with balls, interesting how our language picks up that actually the names of our genitalia correspond to personality quirks. And if you don't have energy flow into the cocky area of your body, you won't have a cocky personality trait. I find that really interesting. So yeah, I mean, it's very hard. It's very hard to reclaim that. And I think if you're a man and you're sure that your sexuality is a bad thing, and I've worked with a lot of people that have come out of deeply religious backgrounds, kind of Asian or Christian, for example. Yeah, it was so vilified growing up. I almost came out of a religious kind of cult community, and to reclaim the idea that sexuality can be good is such hard work. So a lot of men just think that sexuality is bad, and it's bad, and maybe even it's all women's fault. Some men don't think it's quite so bad, but they've had so many messages of it being vilified that they live in doubt. Which is, and this is certainly my story. I'm torn between the boys at school, who are all now toxically masculine, of course.
Yeah.
And, yes, that's true. And also it's that horrible label. I'm torn between what my boys at school said was cool and what everyone else in society is saying. So if I feel sexual, I feel a lot of arousal, there's a woman that, wow, she really fires me up, I'm caught. I don't know. And even if I've got some positive role models within me and some positive beliefs in me, there's enough of a seed of doubt that I'm willing to hesitate.
That's right. Yeah.
So exactly. So how many men do you know, they think and they believe that their sexuality is a God-given great thing, and they never have a moment of internal hesitation or doubt?
Not very many, that's for sure.
It's like the ultimate marine obstacle course. You've got to go through the first 25 years of your life and not be killed by this most vicious assault of conditioning, and still come out with an absolute belief in the goodness of your sexuality on the other side. So that's what we're both talking about, a belief in the goodness. I think that's one of the and this is probably my biggest message to clients. And we always come to this kind of talk at one point, which is you got to take a stand for the goodness in your
That's
heart.
right.
You don't want to destroy any girl. You don't want to mess up her life. You don't want to sleep with her just so you can go and high five with your buddies in the morning. Like this, you want this with your heart as much as you want it with your loins. And that's good. It's good in that. Like never let anyone shame you. And we don't get that message from a father or an older brother growing up.
And there's no message like this out in the world.
A validation of the goodness of those parts of us.
That's right. As far as I know, and maybe I'm not aware, what we're talking about, this is the fundamental underlying message of what we're doing with Ars Amorata, this concept of restoring this love of our sexual nature and the love that we're created as men. And the way you said it is very articulate and very real. And there's not a lot of messages like this out in the world that I know of.
Right.
At all. Especially in this environment where men have been beaten to a quiet pulp. And don't be this this toxic masculine energy. And so they're quietly sitting back and thinking, okay, like I said, am I really to blame here? And men are being blamed, and to the point where they're blaming themselves and they're agreeing and nodding their head. Yes. I mean, you said it very well. So our message has always been to reclaim and to love the fact that we have a masculine spirit and a feminine spirit. To reclaim that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And it's a difficult inquiry as well. I mean, so lucky we've had men over the years, that 17-year-old boys that are just finishing school and finding this message, and we give them this encouragement. I think you're lucky if you luck into hearing about a message like this, honestly, and get some validation.
Yeah.
I also think that there is a lot to be said for the toxicity that exists within men's culture, like this bro slapping each other's back. Some of that goes back like millennia. There's some horrific traits that men have cultivated in their connection to each other, and then they play out with women as well. And it's kind of like what do you call it? Like a purifying facility.
Right.
Like if you take your gasoline, your petroleum over to the plant so you can actually purify it enough to put in the engine of a nice sports car, you've got to take out a lot of the impurities. And a lot of the work that I found myself doing over the years, because your message is like, show up and love women and put yourself out there and just make a strong statement about what you want to have happen and your attraction. Correct. And say it with delight. So I started to do that. And it was really, really powerful, because when I stopped hiding the fact that I really liked women and wanted them near me, a lot came. And then it took many, many years of realizing, oh shit, when I do get in relationships with women, I kind of do all this stuff, which is not like crazily toxic, but is enough of like, there's a lot of flies in my ointment, right? And I had to learn bit by, I mean, the process of just becoming an adult is learning how you continually like just subtly hurt people or fuck things up in relationship or whatever, right?
Sure,
so
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
I'm trying to take out as I go the impurities in some of my sexual energy and my masculine thing. You don't go from unconsciously having a sexual drive to being the divine masculine.
Exactly.
It's a long, humbling
there's a path
road of like picking out the shadow elements of what you're doing. But to be on that path in and of itself is a wonderful thing. And I think all the women out there that are talking about they want to see beautiful men who embrace their heart, they're trustable, but they also are very virile and very
but you don't hear that part sexy. Of it. You don't hear that part of it in the modern discourse, that they're also very virile. They also have that, you hear a lot of words like authenticity and connection and in your heart and this kind of stuff. And it's permeating the discourse, right? But to put that extra phrase on there, and they're horny and love it. Yeah. They love that they have this real strong twinkle in their eye for their girl, Yeah. So
our work is to demonstrate it. Like it doesn't people won't grow into this or embody this if they don't, first of all, see an instance of it out there.
Yeah.
So I think your work in both who you are every time you speak in public and every time you go out and meet people, and also in the thrust of your book, you have to give people a vision for who they can become, because otherwise it's dying out. And that certainly is my legacy as well. I was saying to you the other day, I don't see myself growing into this great kind of transformational coach in the stadium Tony Robbins style person.
No,
I'm much more keen on the more artistic approach. What does it mean to kind of write or create something artful, actually, rather than motivating people to transform their lives? But in the midst of the art, the thing that I want to transmit is that passion is a spiritual virtue. I'm convinced of that. And passion, as being a life force which originates in the hips and the pelvis, is a full-on spiritual virtue. And once you take out some of the impurities from the gasoline, and you let that virtue bubble upwards and animate everything that you do, it is all these things. That it's the creative spirit. It's what's behind the Taj Mahal. It's Homer's Odyssey. It's Epic of Gilgamesh. It's building the pyramids.
All those things.
Seven Samurai.
Yeah. Now we're probably not. Jordan, you and I will never fill stadiums.
And
go ahead. Go ahead.
Don't have them not tapped into the motivation.
Yeah. Well, because the volume of people will not recognize what we're saying. You understand? They won't hear what we're saying.
Right.
On that level. So go ahead.
Maybe not. There's if we got all our divine sacred masculine bros put together a festival, we could hook something up. I think I mean, I've got a skewed view, but I think our culture's moving more in this direction. But what I feel absolutely committed to in my work is being part of a lineage of men who have this spirit at some point. So I belong to a lineage. We talked about the family tree, right? I've got a family tree that goes back to the year 1655. But I also have a chosen lineage, which is every man who ever lived in history that transmitted a spirit that I like. I can draw them all up in a kind of family tree of my hero adventurers, my hero writers, my hero philosophers, and I can belong to that lineage. And even though I don't know these men, and my views of them are full of assumptions, and Henry Miller is problematic.
Yeah.
Got some stories that maybe trespass some edges here and there. I can align with that spirit, and I want to pass that on. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to pass that on. You hear these people that do their coaching. I'm going to awaken 1 million men to the virtue of their spiritual sense of male passion. I don't know how many people it's going to reach, but the whole point of the artistic pursuit, which I've witnessed so much in you, is you just try and nail the thing. So if there's a particular vision that I have that I feel that needs to be said, I try and nail the thing that I'm saying in the way that it needs to be said, and then I leave it out there and it will do its own work.
That's right.
Okay, boom, I put my bomb in time. And it really opened my eyes. I mean, I've gotten really into cinema over the last couple of years, and every 10 years there's a magazine in England from the British Film Institute. It's the Sight and Sound magazine, and they do their 100 greatest movies of all time.
Okay.
Right. And everyone's got their 100 greatest movies list, any publication you want to subscribe to, but the British Film Institute Sight and Sound magazine is the one with the most recognition, and it's got the most amount of critics.
Oh, okay.
And it's just very highly thought of. So if you watch the top 100 movies in the BFI Sight and Sound list, you really get a good deep introduction to cinema. That's what I've been doing during COVID. But they released the new list about 3 weeks ago, and there was a number one that came from totally left field, and no one. It's always Citizen Kane, right, or Hitchcock's Vertigo. It's always Citizen Kane or Vertigo. 2001: Space Odyssey, even Apocalypse Now is up there.
Shawshank Redemption,
feminist film. That's not in the list for some strange reason. That's in the IMDb. Okay. But there's the new #1 film, the best film of all time that ever existed, the greatest masterpiece of cinema, is a film called Jean Dillman, 23 Quai de Commerce, 1080 Brussels. It's the greatest film of all time.
Wow. And
right.
I mean, I've never heard of it. Have you watched
it?
What
they did, yeah, it's epic. It's really, really good. It's totally worth a watch. But what happened, I don't want to go into this particular rabbit hole, but they've, just for representation, they've got more women critics now devising this poll. So this is kind of like the best feminist film of all time. And
I see. So it's floating to the top.
An influence from this. So
right.
Yeah, or it just, rocketed to the top. Yeah, I don't want to go into that because there's so much politicization behind this and the discourse. But what is interesting to me is that a woman, she made this film in 1975. It's a film about a woman who feels an incredible rage within her, and she doesn't know why, and she definitely does not have the language to describe what's happening to her. And this film struck me because my mum told stories, in the 1970s. My mum was like, I was not happy in my life, but I was so numb and I didn't know how to describe it. And it was only by the late 80s that enough of the language of feminism actually came through the culture so that I could describe my situation. Yeah, so this film is really, I mean, it's a work about, anyway.
Well, it's interesting. It captures the isolation of the feminine spirit that never had a voice. It captures that, right?
Yeah. This film is 3.5 hours long, and half the film you're literally watching this woman in her kitchen peeling potatoes, and yet it's extremely compelling, and it's been voted as the best film of all time. We'll put
I have to check it out.
Yeah, I think your artistic tendency would like it. But the reason I'm wasting all this time talking about this on the podcast is that she made this film in 1975 and she died in 2015. And so the moment of recognition where the entire world of critics and directors say, this is the most influential film of our time. She never saw that.
Wow.
Right?
That's right.
And you got to think, if a film that you've never heard of now hits the #1 spot, now is the time that everyone's going to actually rush to watch this film and find out what all the fuss is about. So in a way, it's not only has it been voted the most influential film of all time, its influence is only just beginning.
Because it was unheard of before.
Yeah.
For example,
so all normal folk who are like, there's a new John Dillman. I've heard of
like me.
Hitchcock. I've heard of Citizen Kane. Yeah, you haven't heard of this.
And right? I'm going to watch it. I'm going to find it. And
great. We'll maybe talk about it on the next episode. But she, a great artist in the 1970s, her work only starts to, the seeds of her legacy only start to be sown 6 or 7 years after her death. Right. And who knows what that's going to form now. So this is a very long way of saying maybe we're doing for men and their deep, suppressed, unnameable darkness what this woman director did for women and understanding some of the emotional tenets of feminism back in the 1970s. Maybe it will take 40, 50 years until either our work flowers enough so that future generations have got words, they're ready to consume it and have their lives changed by it. That's what I'm saying. But it doesn't stop as long as I've got enough to eat and pay my monthly bills. It doesn't stop the hunger to try and name the thing that we're trying to name, right?
Yeah.
That fundamentally the sense of male passion, male virility is a virtue and is a needed and beautiful thing. And without it, and I can't give a spoiler for this film, so I won't, but let's just say without the deep, locked up, unfelt, numbed out void that lives deep within a man's seat, without that, really dodgy things are going to happen. That's where real poison to the spirit of men starts to occur.
And that's what we're sitting in right now.
Because you realize one day you wake up and you realize that you've been systematically neutered, not so much by a government that's putting, what do you call it, sediment in the water that lowers our testosterone levels. I don't believe in that kind of
estrogen in the water.
No. I believe much more that society and the way technology has shaped our working habits, plus the psychological and cultural tides are shaping men to just zoom out of our bodies, so we don't even feel anything that is close to being virile.
Yeah, and you know, there could be, we're not sociologists, we can't nail down exactly why this depletion is happening. It could be technology, right? It could be this reliance on technology and not getting out there chopping wood.
Yeah.
We're certain that's got to be some element that, you know, the hormones that are stuck into chickens and that kind of, I don't know. Somebody else can have the conversation about that, but
maybe we've evolved so much that we know in the West how expensive it is to have a child, and that it's going to be the end of our financial freedom if we do have one, that we deplete our own sperm. Maybe evolution takes place at such a rate that you know, we don't want to do it. We don't want to have it.
That's
but
funny.
I definitely believe that technology is the big defining factor that sits upstream of everything, and the amount of changes that we've been through is staggering.
And it's just going to accelerate. Like, you know, the time we're recording this podcast, I think the world, this is kind of a tangent too, the world is about to experience a major shift in technology, a jump forward in technology. 3 weeks ago, they released this latest version of the GPT-3 model, which is AI for text generation. And I think the impact, I don't think the general public knows the impact of this going to happen on the world. And I think we're on the edge of a brand new revolution on a par with the invention of photography. I think something major happening right now behind the scenes, and it's not hit the mainstream yet, but it's going to. And it's still amateur, and it's still simple, and it's still cheesy, and it's still broken. But man, I tell you, it's going to grow fast. This AI technology of, you know, Chat GPT and stuff like that. And it's, I don't know the impact that's going to have, but it's going to have an impact.
So to draw an image, you've got a short poem, and you put your poem into this AI chatbot, and then the chatbot gave you another few stanzas of your poem, which wasn't good from a deep poetry point of view, but it was totally acceptable. Like if you're a 16-year-old boy trying to pass your English lit exam, like that's a totally acceptable poem, right?
I did. Yeah, I'm telling you,
I don't know how you know, college admissions are going to be able to deal with students in the future who do all their coursework from an AI bot.
I wanted to read something real quick. I messed around with it the other day. This ChatGPT. This is a side point, but it's funny. I said, "Have you ever heard of Zan Perrion?" and the thing answers, "Yes, I have heard of Zan Perrion. Zan Perrion is a writer, speaker, and coach who is known for his work in the field of dating and relationships. Great. He has written several books on the topics of dating and relationships, and he's also given lectures and workshops on these subjects. Perrion is the founder of the Alabaster Society.
Oh,
it invents stuff. So Perrion is the founder of the Alabaster Society, a group that is dedicated to exploring and promoting the art of seduction and interpersonal relationships. Some of his notable works, include The Alabaster Girl, The Alabaster Way, and the Alabaster Boulevardier, like boulevard. The Alabaster. It invented stuff. This AI invented. So maybe that's what my next two books are called: The Alabaster Way and The Alabaster Boulevardier. But
it's not just an AI bot, but it's an oracle.
Or it's facetious, or it makes stuff up because it wants to look erudite. I don't know, but this is early days, man. It's rewriting code, it's rewriting poetry, it's rewriting you know, it's doing all kinds of it's elementary, but it's coming down the pipe. And you know, that with the image-based AI, it's here. Something's changing, something shifted in in 2022. Something's going to, we can mark this as a time. This is my prediction on this podcast. We can mark this as a time when we saw the fundamental sea change in technology, in the future way we, you know, the way we interact, the way we interoperate.
Yeah.
I think it's bigger than we think. I really do think it's bigger than we think.
One of the big questions that this poses to me, and it takes us right back to our theme of our podcast here, is what is intelligence and what is our intelligence? And particularly, how will our intelligence operate in the future in a world of artificial intelligences?
Well, Jordan, you look at, the generation of men that has come to the front, come to the fore. They've come to they've matured. We've had 3 years of lockdown and coronavirus scare, and then we've had, and before that, we had 10 years of online dating and Tinder approximation. We've got a generation that is 13 years of non-analog interacting with women.
Yeah.
And so the desire for that hasn't gone away. Anybody who's messed around with Tinder for a period of time that gets disillusioned with it and says that, that's not what I want. I want to be able to know that I have what it takes to represent, go into a party and stand on my, but it's not going away. That technology is going to wrap around all of the way we meet and date. No one's going to be born on this earth, in our Western society, certainly, that will start their dating by going out and trying to meet girls. They're going to start it with their online presence. Social media
and
presence.
Then to go further, you would start it with the AI bot, which is,
exactly,
my psychological profile because you've watched everything I've ever entered into a social media site. Find me a woman who I'd be a good match with. Boom. So it'd be really good for arranged marriages, but then this whole go out in the world and be rambunctious and run up against strangers and like you said, let your penis guide you to places where you'd never go with a gun. Like that aspect will totally be gone.
Completely.
Totally. Yeah.
You'll research everything before you won't go into the unknown, because the unknown is researched to death. You know everything about it.
So that takes out a lot of mystery and excitement and the whole romance of these great stories of adventure that you talk about, which is, I don't know what this next country is going to be. I don't know who I'm going to meet tomorrow night. I don't know who my blind date is. All of that element of mystery is taken out.
Yeah, you can't be, Livingston going into the darkest of Africa, hacking through the jungle anymore, because you can pre-explore. You can hedge your bets before you make a step forward with AI and the internet and all this kind of stuff. So it's like we're not going back.
Going back to this kind of malaise that you're talking about, like younger men feeling as if their testosterone is lower, right? And there might be a biological fact behind that. And I think there are things that you can do on an individual level to attest like some of the
diet and exercise. For certain.
So even if there is like a international biological drift towards lower testosterone, you can take some agency and see what you can do to swim against those currents. I was saying to you, I almost take, it's very weird, I take a kind of Marxist perspective on this. Like everything is to do with means of production and the social class in which we find ourselves. I think this is a really defining factor in terms of the virility that we feel. And what happened in the West over the last 40, 50 years is that what was the European and the North American working class doesn't really exist in the same way it did, or a massive swathe of those people have been lifted from working class. So we're talking factory workers, farm workers, day laborers, builders, like the building staff and
Physicality,
and all that kind of stuff. Whole pot of labor has been migrated now into middle class, which is you go to college, or even if you don't, you're educated in computers. And so you are now in a technical kind of service environment. All the jobs the factory work got given over to foreign countries. Other immigrants come in and do a lot of the physical manual labor, and then they go home after 5 or 7 years because they've saved up enough money. So men in highly developed economies have all gone into desk chair jobs where we never were before. And I think what that does is 40 or 60 years ago, your father or your grandfather was moving in his body all day. He's like blood, sweat, and tears into his job. He's feeling the pangs of hunger. He's identified training himself for 40 hours a week to be identified with the grit of being a body in the earth, moving stuff, wrenching stuff with his whole body.
Yes.
And at the end of a week, all you want to do at the end of that is to have some kind of release. Guys get drunk, or they go out to the local bar and take out some of their anger because of the, you know that your whole body is a slave to the capitalist foreman or whatever it is. So these guys go out and they get drunk, they fight, they need to discharge some of that physical energy into women. And that's kind of the working class life. And now you have a situation where the working class, kind of middle class, is all online. We condition ourselves 40 hours a week into the computer. The body, you're not feeling your body.
Right.
Your attention is not in your body. Your attention is in the screen. So there's a great quote from philosopher Byung-Chul Han. He says, "We no longer live on the earth and under the sky, but on Google Earth and in the cloud." And it's almost like there's a migration of attention has come out of the physical body and into the cloud. And now when you're talking about artificial intelligence, it's like, what do you spend most of your day thinking about? How bad your shoulders hurt, what you need to get on your knees to weld later on, how many boxes you need to pick up and load into a truck, how many trenches you need to dig. You're thinking about abstract data. So it's no surprise that there's no time in which your awareness actually comes into the body and concerns itself with bodily needs. So that people say, oh yeah, it must be true. We don't work in factories anymore and we work on the computer, but it's very hard to slow down and let that insight really hit you. If you went to the gym and lifted weights for 40 hours a week, imagine how different you would be after a year.
Of course.
It's like, imagine 40 hours a week training your body to be a physical beast of the earth for 40 years. And then imagine working, with your piano fingers on some keyboard, programming some, software as a service thing, speaking on the phone a little bit. You're programming yourself to be
consuming all your adventure comes through screens.
You're living in the cloud, and then you wonder what happens to your embodied virility. Well, you're not doing anything to actually contact that. So touch grass is the saying at the moment, like really back to the earth, spend time.
Cut grass, you said?
Touch grass.
Oh, touch grass.
This is a phrase that's thrown about at the moment. Take off your shoes and your socks and walk on the grass and feel that there's such thing as the earth and the
ground yourself to the earth.
And some people take up gardening and all these kinds of things. So that's one aspect of it. Like the whole means of production has moved into this technological sphere. And so we're almost not even in our head, or we're in our heads right now. We're going to even not be in our heads in the future, like just where our attention goes with this artificial intelligence.
Our bodies have become merely a vessel to shunt around this productive engine, which is our mental technological brain. And so our bodies, we don't collide with the earth anymore like we used to, like you said. When I was in South Africa 15, 16 years ago, what struck me about the men I met there, photographers and artists and stuff like that, is they felt like they were born of the earth.
Yeah.
There's a real strong feeling that they had their feet on the earth. And I never forgot that. I thought, wow, like everybody I met, even the people that were, ostensibly office workers, they were part of the bread and bone of the African soil.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. They felt like there's very connectedness there.
It's a super rugged territory, right? So it will form you as a rugged person. It's the same with, the old-fashioned Aussie or the old-fashioned, what you would find in the Wild West in the States.
Right.
That you don't see so much anymore because everyone's in air-conditioned fans and, it doesn't take a lot of ruggedness in order to survive on the land. So we don't train it, we don't become it. I think the other thing that happened with this migration of ourselves into technological beings is that we now, before we were consigned to a fate as, you're either working class, you're middle class, or you're aristocracy, right? So you're talking about 85% of the population base is working class.
Working class.
And that means that your future is defined and you're never going to jump up to middle class unless like by some very fortuitous run of events, you end up getting a job in somewhere or an apprenticeship with somebody, My Fair Lady type thing. But I think, and I know this intimately because I kind of grew up in the closing days of it. But when you're deeply, you look at your future and you're like, man, I've got labor for the rest of my days. Like, I ain't never going to be a foreman. I ain't never going to be a manager. I'm
never going to own a house. College.
Yeah, I'm going to be in this factory for the rest of my life, and I'm glad to be so. When that is the vista of your hopes and expectations, you might as well fuck up with your life. Like, run off to Paris, become a bohemian, get on a steamboat, go across to America, because it's like, my fate as a peasant is so dire that it's worth gambling my entire life just in case it's any more fun than what I've got in store. So just the sheer nihilism of that being your fate. And what we're living now is, whether it's real or not, like, we've got this carrot of meritocracy. Like, if you work hard, Zan, like, if you just put out more podcasts, and if you put out shorts 5 days a week, and you hustle, and you're online, and you're responding to every tweet for 17 hours a day, whatever it is. If you just do that, then you can go up. And you've now got this affluenza. You become this middle class neurotic, which is, well, everyone around me is rising up. I've got to fight to keep up with the Joneses. And you really give a shit about your future and your success. And the beauty is, we can shape our lives much more than any one of our forebears.
Yeah. But
the bad news is that the weight of responsibility that we have to take now for our lives being successful is so great. And we are, I mean, unless you've got a massive inheritance on the way, we are wholly responsible for making it happen and not being a loser. I believe the level of stress of that is so high that it has hormonal impact, like the amount of cortisol that you constantly live under in the body will have a testosterone dampening effect. You can't take a day off because someone is going to hustle more than you. You can't sleep 8 hours a night because your brain is still thinking about all this information. You don't get normal circadian rhythms, even in your own body.
Right. I think because you're overworked and no sleep.
You're over responsible for climbing up the ladder, of having a better tomorrow in a rapidly rising cost of living world, and
all you can afford is junk food.
Right.
Which impacts it more.
Or you just need a break, so you just fill up your body with beer and pizza, 2-for-1 beer and pizza night, whatever it is, just to so it's a crippling weight of responsibility, actually, to be able to define your own life. And I tell you, the most time that I felt in my hips and horny and wanting to unleash my virile male spirit onto the world is when I just quit a job, or when I'd internally renounced success. I decided I don't give a fuck about success anymore. I'm going to allow myself to really be me and live in my body. And I think in those times, my testosterone and my drive and my virility really increased. But whenever the stress of like, no, Jordan, you got to push because there's another kind of goal to get to, because that's going to fit into you climbing up the ladder of security and building a future. As soon as my psychic machinery gets caught up in that whole thing, there is no space left for joyful virility. It takes a testosterone to kind of climb that, but it's not an embodied testosterone. It's not a testosterone that really likes women and wants to sit there for like a 6-hour lunch date and really enjoy, or sack off the rest of the day. I'm sleeping with this girl, I'm taking her to a hotel somewhere, tell the boss I'm sick. Like that, there's no space for that anymore. And I think if you're compelled to your fate as you're never going to do anything apart from be off the factory floor, you might as well look at your life and scheme for misdemeanors.
Yeah. And what you said, Jordan, is that what motivates you is to move towards a life full of art and artistic expression of life, as opposed to subscriber counts, for instance, right? Or how many likes I can get, or how can I increase my presence out there. You'd rather nail down the central theme of your artistic endeavor, which you'll never nail down all your life. You'll try all your life, but you'll never nail it. But that's cool.
Yeah.
Right. So you'd rather go ahead. I was just going to say, you'd rather do that than to increase enterprise and to get more subscribers and more presence out there.
Yeah.
You'd rather hit the mark.
In my depth and in my essence, what I want is hit the mark and leave my version of I don't know, Seven Samurai, Apocalypse Now, you know, like the big masterpiece where it's like I nailed the artistic transmission of a spirit to hand down to the next generation in my best of days, and it takes me a lot of time and space and relaxation to come back to that energy. That's how I feel, and I'm only able to talk to these things about you because I have parts of me as well that are stuck in the affluenza cycle, or you know, oh yeah, hustle today for a better tomorrow. And it's a constant challenge to recognize where I get caught up and I'm not living my most passionate, truly honest, virile life because I got stuck on something.
You're pursuing something else,
So it's a practice always to come back to that energy, the purity.
Super interesting. New phase of civilization coming down the pipe. I think so. 1920. Imagine that the world's shifting there. The airplanes were invented. You know, photography was new. Einstein came up with his destroyed the concepts of Newton and stuff like that in a general sense, quantum mechanics and all this kind of stuff. All those things in 1920. Now we're in 2020, and I can't I can't help but feel that there's some major shifts happening. I'm not about to happen, but happening. So it's interesting. Here we go. Another 20 years of speaking and talking and writing and scratching our head, you know?
This is my takeaway message from the call. You got to get off your computer for a long time if you want to feel your dick.
Go hack in the jungle if you can find
really
one now.
Feel it. Yeah, exactly. It's been muted as much as humanity. No, it's an epic challenge. And do you remember these films from the 70s? I think they were British films. Confessions of a Window Cleaner, Confessions of a Plumber.
No, I watched westerns in the 70s. I was a western kid.
So in the 70s, the restrictions on what could be shown in film started to come off, right? And
all the girls are naked.
And you had like Deep Throat and all these like.
But even general movies, there's always a naked girl in it. Just a general movie that had nothing to do with, you know, like Deep Throat. There was always a naked girl in it. I remember that when I was a kid.
Right. Well, it's not art. If there's not a female breast in a 2-hour feature film, it's not art. You watch Bertolucci, there's always a moment. Like gratuity, you don't need to do a close-up of that woman breastfeeding a child. There
you don't?
but yeah, like, so in England, like our very British stiff upper lip form of soft porn was Confessions of a Window Cleaner and Confessions of a Plumber. And it was never Confessions of an Investment Banker or Confessions of a Computer Programmer. You had to be in a trade with a bag of tools, you know, to sneak in the window and give it a service.
That's funny.
I think there's something really, really true about having a profession where your body is your tool.
Your body's occupied,
Yeah. That actually gives you virility and mischief and trains that into you.
For sure. Wow. Well, there you go, Jordan. Interesting subject, huh?
Closing thoughts. Seems like we're on the denouement.
Yeah. No, I just I'm sitting in more questions than answers and thoughts. I want to contemplate this. Like after the call, I want to go and really think about this because it's an interesting time, and my shakeup, like we talked at the beginning of this, was that men are saying what you were talking about 20 years ago, we don't really relate to because we don't have this horniness in our body. Like, so I need to contemplate that. And because there's still that desire for that, you know? So anyway, I don't have any closing thoughts relative to that. I think we and you articulated it. This massive question that we're sitting in right now, which is, and I'm curious about the future. I'm very curious about the future, and I'm very optimistic. I'm not pessimistic at all. I have a lot of faith in the conversation we're having, the kind of work we're trying to do. I have a lot of faith in the hearts of young men, and I have a lot of faith in the hearts of young women. I really do. I don't have this feeling of men going their own way and giving up, and women, staunch feminist energy that is like attacking. I don't buy any of that. We don't buy into it at all. I think there's a good message for good people that are, and you can't find a good message anywhere. So we're trying to at least hint towards a good message for people.
I'm thinking about the stories you said you really like about journeys, right?
Yeah.
Because I think these are some of the ultimate best messages, particularly for the kind of young men that are saying, I don't feel my virile energy. They're obviously irked or disturbed about something enough to be bringing this to the table. They feel an absence, or they don't have a reference point of this energy, but they know somewhere that there should be something there, otherwise they wouldn't be engaged in having this conversation. And I think these journey stories that you talk about, and you call it journeys from order to chaos, I call it journeys to the center of the earth. You get Dead Man, Sheltering Sky is a perfect one of these. Obviously Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Throwing out film names here. What else is that? Like Central Station is a bit more of a woman's one. The Motorcycle Diaries.
Yeah. Order to Chaos, man. All those movies.
There's a few of these, and they are epic. I love them because I've lived them, right?
Yeah,
and I
you
think
did those journeys.
Why am I saying this? If you're a young man and you don't even feel some of the darker passions and mystery of your lower body and how that moves, I think it's going to really take a substantial time away from computers and away from the cloud, where you are continually, every single day, conditioning yourself to not be an embodied person and to go on your own journey to the center of the earth. So you can feel what that's like. And I was lucky because I traveled in a time where it was before internet. So once a week, I would go to this internet cafe. And there would be a power outage, and I would lose my hour-long email that I was writing, and everything. I would just give up, right? Or write postcards and send them home. But that form of, it's not just the travel, but it's being an embodied person discovering the land. And then all these films that you talk about, I actually like The Sheltering Sky the best. It's the most chaotic, strange one.
Yeah, me too. I like it a lot.
It's completely nuts. And they make these journey to the center of the earth films in these exotic places, not to show off the exotic place, but because of the madness in North Africa that they ran into. It demonstrates the madness of the psyche and the soul, when there's an interior component to the external adventure, right? So you're seeing all these crazy things happen, but really it's the soul of the person who's going on this journey that unravels into this
primal essence,
ecstasy, but complete confusion and surrender and madness all in one. And that's what you got to find. That's what you got to find. And one of my top films of all time, and I watched this because of a recommendation from you, is Apocalypse Now, which is based on the book Heart of Darkness.
Yeah.
And this is a story about obsession. And it's about a man who was so completely obsessed, he becomes enraptured, that there was this maverick rogue genius somewhere in the jungle who was so intelligent, but went so crazy, right? This Kurtz figure. And he wanted to go down the river to understand the essence of a man that would go so dark that he would throw away everything and just go mad, right?
Heart of Darkness,
I love that book so much because that's what I lived. Crossing that border into Mexico and going into South America and just being like, I don't know where this will end up geographically. That's not important, but it's an encounter with yourself as the madman, or at least an encounter with yourself as the sexual man, the sexual beast, the wild, unchained one who can throw off all those shackles. And you got to taste what that's like.
Yeah. And in The Sheltering Sky, there's a scene which I won't give away, but John Malkovich's character goes into a place. He's led into a place by his dick where he would not go with a gun. There's a scene in there. And he's like, what am I doing? I got to go. Oh, that's good.
That's the spirit. Yeah.
All right.
If we don't live that and pass that on, one day there might be a generation of men where nobody lives that.
Well, yeah. People are moving there. Maybe 100 years from now, everybody's existence is in the cloud and VR. And maybe Zuckerberg is right, and we're all floating around with no legs in the metaverse, and we're fulfilled. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. All right.
Very good conversation, Jordan. Very
Great,
good.
cool. Yeah. And if you've been watching along and you're liking what you're hearing, subscribe,
Yes.
get on our email list, follow up, watch our work, because everything we're talking about and trying to do in the world is firmly about what we're describing here.
Go to amorati.net, sign up for our course, join our illustrious band of brothers. And we have this conversation all the time. This is what the whole point, to stay connected to this. So, and thanks for listening.
All right.
And thank you, Jordan.
See you next time. Yeah. Thank you, Zan.
Done.
All right. I just stop the recording.